Story 1. Not double hyphenated, but I had classmates who happened to have the same name, for example, Smith. They dated and married, and hyphenated their names. Mr. and Mrs. Smith Smith. Really? The one context in which no one has to change their name? Story 2. Not a double hyphenate situation, but my hyphenated friend who only took the hyphenate in her teens. She originally just had her mother's surname. Got married, kept her own hyphenated surname, and gave her child his father's single surname. I think it was just a question of brevity. Story 3. I guess they just keep it up until everyone sounds like royalty. The Queen's full title is Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of her other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, and Sovereign of the Most Noble Order of the Garter. Story 4. Going to be that Family Guy gag about that old lady with the really long name. Margaret Pip, Woolworth Carrington von Schumacher Chanel Astor Livingston Comte de Saint-Exupéry Mountbatten Windsor Armani Roosevelt von Trapp Wickenham Hearst Montgomery Rothschild Johnson and Johnson Twillsworth Dolce Gabbana von Zweig Second Montgomery de la Roche Geico Vanderbilt Lannister Van Buren Butterworth How I Met Your Mother Wrigley Louise Dreyfus Ludwig Morgan Stanley Dumont Lamborghini Forbes Higby Winthrop Chanel Remy Martin Fitzwilliam Kennedy Motel 6 Fairchild Brook Pritzker Davenport Von Stolen Monty Python Ellisworth Aston Martin Haverbrook Ziff Lauder Hilton DuPont Kincaid Winslow Coors Oviatt Marlboro Pembroke Huffington Bush Mellon Sinclair Mellencamp Starbucks Van Dyke 3rd Montgomery Marriott Barrington Chatsworth Big League Chew Chesterfield Kensington Booth Bishop Longbottom Nottingham Meisterburger Burgermeister Tudor Habsburg Rockefeller Onassis. Story 5. I have a hyphenated uncommon common last name. My husband has a hyphenated common uncommon last name. For both of our uncommon last names, we are the last in our family lines to have them. If we were having kids, they would have a hyphenated last name of both of our uncommon last names. The uncommon names aren't bad. They sound cool, but the hypothetical kid would spend their life correcting the spelling of their last name. We have done it. It is a rite of passage. Edit to correct spelling errors because I am perpetually on mobile. My sincere apologies for making spelling errors on the internet. Story 6. I have a pair of friends that married. One had a hyphenated pair of Eastern European names that looked like a cat walked across the keyboard without touching any vowels but spilled every accent mark possible across it. The other had one of those unhyphenated, multi-generational Hispanic names. They tried to figure out how to make it work and eventually said forget it, and both changed their last name to a single monosyllabic name and have happily never had to explain how to spell or pronounce their name again. Story 7. I came across someone with a double hyphenated name. Call it Smith Thomas Johnson. Except don't, because you are supposed to say Smith Thomas Johnson, or they would get offended. For the life of me, I couldn't hear the difference, but boy, could they. Story 8. Where I live, spouses are legally required to keep their own legal surnames, so you can't take your spouse's. For the kids, I picked the surname I preferred and paired it with my husband's. Story 9. Both of us have hyphenated surnames. My birth certificate is hyphenated. Social security cards don't take a hyphen, so it looks like 4 names. Driver's license doesn't match either, really. I have transcripts, W-2s, and medical records under both the hyphenated last name and the standalone last name on the social security card. When we got married, we were allowed to keep any combination between 1 to 4 of our last names. We ended up choosing my very last name for all 3 of us to help put an end to the chaos. Shifting other names to second middle names was an option. We all have the same single last name now, and it's great. Story 10. I have a hyphenated surname, but my wife does not. For our kids, we created a new hyphenated name by choosing which of my 2 last names sounded best combined with her last name. It's really not that complicated. Story 11. My surname wasn't hyphenated, but my husband's was. His last name was literally so long that we couldn't hyphenate as it wouldn't fit into legal documents. We each kept our respective last names when we got married and are planning on giving children my last name. My husband is thinking about switching his last name to mine when we have kids, but hasn't decided if it is worth the argument with his father. Story 12. My mom did it to me, and it is a pain in my rear. I legally got it changed and then moved out of state. When I moved back to the state, all I had was my birth certificate, so the darn hyphenated last name came back into my life, and I have to get it legally changed again. Story 13. I am in the camp of just pick one name. Do not hyphenate. I hyphenated my own last name and now I have 6 aliases. Found this out when I refinanced my house. It makes every appointment difficult. The pharmacy is difficult. People do not know how to alphabetize hyphenated names. It is a nightmare. Oh, and your passport has to match your driver's license? And make sure you remember what name you used for credit cards. It's horrible. Pick one name and stick with it. Story 14. My high school boyfriend and I both had hyphenated surnames, and we joked about combining them to create a name situation. Of course, we broke up, and now he professionally goes by only one of his surnames. Same with my sister, who never married. Legally, her name is still hyphenated, but professionally it was easier to just go with one. Story 15. Iceland has the best solution. Almost everyone is their father's or mother's son or daughter. For example, someone might have the surname Sveinsson if they are a son, or Sveinsdottir if they are a daughter. Surnames are not passed down unless the son or daughter is named after their parent. Brothers and sisters have different surnames, and half-brothers and half-sisters have completely different surnames. Story 16. My husband and I gave our child a hyphenated surname and have told them many times they are free to drop one of the names, which they have shown no interest in doing. They surprised us this summer by coming out as non-binary and changing their first name. It is a perfect example of parents totally mispredicting what will be an issue in their children's lives. Story 17 had a new employee processed in a few months back. Their last name was along the lines of Smith Jones White Green. Parents, as a helpful tip, federal database systems dislike that and will give your child endless problems for the rest of their lives if you do that to them. The same thing goes for people who randomly scatter other punctuation marks into their children's names. Story 18. I come from a British family with an old hyphenated surname. Back in the day, if you were a gentleman or an aristocrat, you would add the surname of the family you married into your surname if it was posh enough. You would then normally only use 2 or the most prestigious one, even though technically you may have 8. For example, the Drax family, whose actual surname is Plunkett Ernal Earl Drax. Our family recently married into a much posher family, but we stopped the tradition as the names rhymed and we were never really aristocrats, just their educated servants. One of our cousins swapped one of their surnames to their partner's name. Story 19. I'm Hispanic, where it's common to have hyphenated surnames, and while a minority do have up to 8 surnames, typically most have 2. For example, let's say Jose Rodriguez Lopez marries Maria Aguilar Hernandez, and they have a son. The son's name would now be Daniel Rodriguez Aguilar. Years later, Daniel Rodriguez Aguilar has grown and is getting married to Camila Perez, and they have a daughter. The daughter would then be named Olivia Rodriguez Perez. As you all can see, the surnames don't just keep adding up through generations because most often, the maternal surname is dropped while the paternal surname remains unless, of course, the couple decides differently. Story 20. My friend has a hyphenated name and he married a girl with a multi-syllable last name, so they combined them into a new one. They ran into issues sometimes, though. Another friend had a hyphenated name and married a foreign girl. The kids took their dad's English surname and their mom's Chinese surname. Their passports have multiple names inside, and they often need to bring extra IDs with them. Story 21. Not what you were asking in the slightest, but I saw a customer record at work recently. Everyone had a hyphenated surname in the family. All 4 kids were given hyphenated first names too. Why would you do that to them? Story 22. I work with someone whose parents are not in their life, and their spouse was adopted. When they had their first child, they all went to the courthouse and took a new 3rd surname together. Story 23. Unrelated, but I have been seeing a guy recently, and we realized that if we ever hyphenated names, one of the combos would be Boba Fett. Like, should we just say forget it and get married now? Haha. Story 24. Does not apply to me, but I am giving a semi-related answer anyway. I used to work in the marriage department issuing marriage licenses. I didn't know, even after working the job for years, that a couple can choose to smash their names together until I encountered an actual case of it for the first time. For example, suppose your last names are McKinley and Patel. Either one of you or both can choose a surname like Mikatel or Pakinley or any variation thereof. That is a real option. Story 25. Here's one for you. I'm hyphenated with the initials AB and polyamorous. My two partners have different styles of last names. One has a standard single last name, designated as C, and the other has a Hispanic double last name, which we will refer to as DE. No one wants to do the paperwork required for a name change. So we're thinking about choosing one name that best fits with each child's first and middle names. For instance, if we end up using a Hispanic name for one, then maybe we go with D for that child. However, the idea of having the kids all have different last names seems like it would be difficult to manage. So we'll figure it out when we get there. Story 26. My wife had a hyphenated last name when we married. She took mine because she was tired of being misidentified by the first half of her last name, or that being used as her whole last name, or even worse, being identified under the second half. The first half was a name that is also a male first name, so she'd often hear, "I thought you were a man." This was 20 years ago, so people were less sensitive about individuals' genders. Story 27. I'm having a related issue. Only my name is hyphenated and my partner's isn't. My big dilemma is that I prefer to pass down my mother's last name, partly because it's shorter and more unique, but mostly because I don't believe in the patriarchal tradition of only passing down male surnames. However, there is a part of me that would feel bad about cutting my dad out of the picture. Basically, I feel like I'm choosing between my two parents while also trying to honor my own values. Plus, my partner's name is super boring. Story 28. In case of the double-double scenario, why not put all the letters of both surnames into a random word generator and see what comes out? I tried Parker Bowles and Zeta Jones and got Lodrejkasatu. Congratulations, you are now Polish. Story 29. My wife didn't exactly hyphenate her last name. She combined her middle name and maiden name into her new legal middle name. She told me early on that any kids would just have my surname because she has a largely unexplained aversion to hyphenated children's surnames. She's been asked by friends who kept their surnames why she took mine. She explained it as, "For most people, it's a man you didn't choose giving you your surname. I'm choosing the man to take one from. There's no shame in whatever you're doing, but that's my wife's take." Story 30. I'm the child of a couple who kept their names. My older sister mostly used my mom's second name. My mom's name is a middle name on my passport, but I use both. My brother only has my dad's second name because my dad signed his birth certificate that way. So it's a mix and really up to us how we wanted to use the names. Story 31. This is common in Hispanic culture. However, the mother's name is still dropped after one generation. So grandkids just get double grandpa last names, and the paternal last name goes first. Jose Garcia Torres married Maria Rodriguez Cruz. Their kid is Pedro Garcia Rodriguez. This is traditional, but still the way it's done most of the time. And if they only use one last name, then the kid's name is usually going to be Pedro Garcia, which is the paternal last name. I did not have a hyphenated last name, but made my maiden name a second middle name when I got married, just so I could still have a legal connection to it. Story 32. It's a matter of personal choice. Some combine both surnames, others choose one or create a new one. Discussing it openly and considering each family member's feelings is crucial in deciding what works best for everyone. Story 33. I've always questioned this because I'd like to change to my dad's last name but keep my mom's married last name. I've had it for 21 years, so I feel it would just cause problems to change it. However, I then think about how it would look when I marry. Would she hyphenate her last name plus mine as well, or just straight up change it to the hyphenated name? One of which isn't even a family name. I just keep it out of respect for my mother. Story 34. My last name is hyphenated. My wife never changed hers when we got married. My kids only use the second half of my name, my father's. When we got married, we both agreed my last name was too much. It's often more characters than a computer fill-in field will allow, and a triple hyphenate was too ridiculous to consider. As I only use my full name for legal matters, the kids got the more efficient one-name version. We did consider using the Scandinavian daughter takes the mother's surname option, mom has Finnish blood, but that was considered just too complicated. Story 35. Eventually, you end up with Johann Gambalpity de von Osfernsch Plendensch Litterkras Grenben Fried, Digger Dingle Dangle Dongle Dungle Burstein von Nacker Thrasher Applebanger Horowitz Stickelensic Grandernati Spell Tinkle Granlich Grumblemeier Spelterwasser Kirstlich, Himbeleisen bon Wagen Guten Ben Bitia Nürnberger Bratwurselger Spurten mit Swimich Lube von Hotkopf de Volm.